ladies and gentlemen. This is Jeff Rains coming to you again with Foundation of Civilization and Our Changing World. This week we've had, well, it's another interesting week. What's been happening around the world? How is the U.S. president reacting now that his vow to end the Russian-Ukraine war within 24 hours has kind of gone bust? How are European countries reacting to the U.S. calls for peace? Which countries in Asia are sharing weapons fire this week? What betrayals have media personalities admitted to this week? Actually, it's been over the past couple of weeks, but let me give you a rundown with my weekly video. It is May 31st, 2025. And to start off with, the markets they're based on energy, and energy is pretty much provided by oil. So West Texas Intermediate crude ended the week at $60.79. Brent ended at $63.90. OPEC ended at $63.48. Gold ended this week at $32.89 and I'm sorry, $3,289.57. Silver ended the week at $32.98, and the Baltic Exchange Dry Goods Index ended at up just a little bit at $1,418. I want to start including the bonds in my analysis here because bonds are extremely important. The bond market is actually much larger than the stock market, and they tend to be a little more stable. However, recently we've been seeing some volatility in the bond market, which is a harbinger of bad things to come. I'm going to try to do some analysis on that in a little bit and give you a little more details as to the challenges that are coming up with the bond markets and all the markets in general. The U.S. bond yield, 10-year bond yield, was at 4.408%. The U.K. bond yields were at 4.64%. The Japanese bond yields, I'm going to have to double check this one, but the numbers that I showed were 1.5%. And unfortunately for Japan, their bond yields are going to have some serious challenges in the future. Their bond market was one of those that is very shaky. And Japan's economy is one of those that we need to watch to see when Japan starts to wobble, when their economy starts to wobble, the rest of the world is likely to wobble also. As far as military and naval deployments go, ISR flights remain pretty much the same. Flights along the southern border and out west. And Diego Garcia, I noted that the B-2s have been replaced by B-52s. I had some reports that there were 4 aircraft. They may have dropped that back down to 2. Not exactly sure, but I also found out that there was a deployment of some B-52s to Spain. In the Navy, of the 293 ships that we have, 101 are deployed, 66 are underway, and I should also note that these numbers are the same that I had last week. I actually did not have an update from last week, so I'll just go over the locations of the aircraft carriers. The USS George Washington remains in Yokosuka, Japan. The America was away from Sasebo, Japan. It was not in port, out somewhere conducting drills, operations, something to that effect. The Carl Vinson was operating in the Arabian Sea. The Abraham Lincoln was in San Diego. The Harry Truman was operating in the Mediterranean Sea. And hopefully for the Truman, they're headed home because heaven knows they need to get this cruise over with. The Nimitz transitioned to Singapore Straits, and but that was, like I said, a week ago, probably over a week ago. The Ronald Reagan was away from its port in Bremerton, Washington. The Tripoli was at its home port in San Diego. The Wasp returned to Norfolk. Well, it was last week it returned to Norfolk. The Iwo Jima was operating off the U.S. East Coast. The Gerald R. Ford departed Norfolk, Virginia a couple weeks ago. And the George H.W. Bush conducted a Family Day cruise. Well, it probably would have been a couple of Saturdays ago. So, to start with the major conflicts, how is the U.S. president reacting to Russia and Ukraine defying his efforts to bring peace in 24 hours? Well, I want to make a note that I appreciated his desire to bring about peace, but no one with any sense thought that he was serious about the 24-hour timeline. I know I was happy that he was at least making the effort for peace, as opposed to quite a few of other world leaders that are pushing for war. Now it seems that the U.S. president is getting tired of trying to negotiate peace between the two. And each time he or someone else comes up with a promising proposal, Russia or Ukraine seems to launch an attack against the other and making some significant, causing significant damage and deaths, and nothing seems to come of it. I have to kind of question the seriousness. I understand Russia's concern, and I also understand Ukraine's position. They need to start figuring out a way forward. Ukraine is running out of people. The Ukrainians are fighting back against the recruiters, and they're actually attacking the recruiting stations. And at this point, it doesn't matter how many bombs we send them. They don't have people to operate the systems anymore. Now, in response, how's Europe helping us? Europe is backing Ukraine with the promise of more weapons with a greater range and lethality. Germany's prime minister lifted the range limit on its weapons that it supplied to Ukraine. That, in particular, is a Taurus cruise missile, air-launched cruise missile. I say cruise missile. I'm not sure if it's just air-launched or not. I haven't dug into the parameters of the Taurus missile yet. Now, in response to the increased threats, the former Russian President Medvedev issued threats of a greater war in Europe. Europe is also, I find it kind of funny, and I plan on doing a little bit more research to go over the status of the war in Europe. The United States is moving away from the war in Ukraine and pivoting to China, and European leaders are taking over more responsibility. They initially said that they wanted to bring in 65,000 troops that they can deploy to Ukraine. Then they figured out they don't have enough troops and they can't afford to send them all to Ukraine. They said that they could produce 25,000 troops. They estimate 25,000 troops. The last estimate that I saw is they bumped that up to about 40,000 troops. So despite the European leaders' promise earlier this year to take on more responsibility, it turned out to be a lot of rhetoric, and they're finding that their capabilities do not match their words. European markets. The DAX ended the week at 23,997.48. The FTSE ended at 8,772.38. CAC 40 ended at 7,751.89. The IBEX ended at 14,152.20. As I mentioned, European military leaders are recognizing that the war in Russia is proving to be very challenging. And although Russia is having a tough time in Ukraine on the ground, other forces are being spared. This past week, General Sir Roly, the head of the British Army, said during an address at the UK-based think tank, the Royal United Service Institute, and I quote from his speech, the more than 3 years of full-scale war in Ukraine has wreaked havoc on Moscow's land forces, but other swaths of its military, like its Air Force and much of the Navy stationed away from Ukraine, have been largely unscathed. I would also argue that they have been learning a lot in the process, even with the ground war, even with their ground forces being getting havoc wreaked on them. While war is looming, Britain is staring down a serious threat of not having enough food to sustain its people. It's been noted by a former UK intelligence chief, this time Sir David Omand, warns the nation that they need to be preparing. In Norway, they've learned some lessons. Kongsberg, Norway, Odd John Resser, the Kongsberg emergency planning officer, has noted that the lessons that we learned from Ukraine is that everybody pitched in. He noted that breweries were pivoted to making Molotov cocktails, and schools were preparing as shelters, and various other things. Something that, well, and a lot of European nations have noted that they need to make changes. They need to be making preparations for war with Russia. And some of them are doing well, some of them are not doing well. Over in Asia, Nikkei was ended the week at 37,965.10. The SSE index ended at 3,347.49. The Hang Seng index ended the week at 23,289.77. The BSE Sensex ended at 81,452.01. And the Nifty 50 ended the week at 24,750.70. I noted that a couple of Asian nations engaged in a border skirmish. They were trading some small weapons fire. This was between Thailand and Cambodia. Unfortunately for the individual, one person was killed. A Cambodian soldier was killed in this skirmish. Amidst all of the tariff disputes, the U.S. president is decrying China's effort with a pause in the tariffs, suggesting that they've already violated the agreement with less than 2 weeks into it. China is making a push for new alliances as they push deals with ASEAN nations, and Gulf states, ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. ASEAN nations include the countries of Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. Last week, I noted that North Korea failed to launch one of their new ships, naval ships, a destroyer. Analysts suggest, after they have reviewed some of the data, that it will be tough to salvage this ship. In the Middle East, the U.S. president is very positive about talks with Iran. Unfortunately, Iran does not share the same optimism. Radio Free Europe reports, and I quote from the article, but there have been reports about proposals to break the deadlock as Washington is insisting Iran give up uranium enrichment and Tehran is rejecting the demand altogether. There are more discussions of ceasefire between Gaza and Israel, even as Israel continues to conduct operations, killing dozens. This past week, last week I noted that Israel allowed some relief convoys to make it into Gaza to provide food. And at the food distribution site, there has been chaos. Weapons fire and a handful of people killed. I can't imagine the devastation and the mess that it is there. Over in Africa, in the world of finance, it isn't a huge upgrade, but it is an upgrade. Moody's upgraded Nigeria's bond rating from B3 to they upgraded Nigeria's bond rating to B3 from CAA1. This means that it is still rather risky. Nigeria's bonds are rather risky. Nigeria has significant financial challenges to address, but they are making progress. And in a reversal from my report last week of problems finding water, the skies opened up and provided a deluge for Nigeria. Unfortunately, it was too much too quickly, and so far they have found 151 people that were killed in flooding in that country. In the Americas, the Dow Jones Industrial Average ended at 42,270.07. The S&P ended at 5,911.69. The NASDAQ was up a little this week to 19,113.77. Well, Mexico is still struggling through cartel violence. In an explosion, and I quote from CBS News, an explosive device killed 6 soldiers and wounded 2 others in a western Mexican region racked by drug cartel violence. Near town in Michoacan, the state destroyed an armored vehicle in which troops were traveling. 6 soldiers were killed and 2 were wounded. Now, how much control do the cartels have across the U.S. border? Well, Peter Reuter, a professor at University of Maryland who studied the U.S. drug markets for decades, he is quoted as saying, "My impression is that they sell to U.S. distributors, but they don't have their own operations on this side of the border," which actually makes sense because if cartel members are actually found on this side of the border, they could reveal quite a bit about cartel operations. So they limit their exposure by selling to people on this side and cutting off who the associates are. The cartels also know that if an individual is born in Mexico, the DEA will not hire them, so they stick to Mexican nationals. That they have trouble running into that, especially with current immigration situation in the United States. There was a trade deal between Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel, and it is proceeding with excitement and much excitement from U.S. steel workers. The U.S. president suggested he might double steel tariffs from 25% to 50%, especially after they made the deal with Nippon and U.S. Steel. Now, additionally, federal judges are trying to block the U.S. president and the State Department's termination of student visas. It has been well documented that foreign governments, especially China, is infiltrating U.S. universities with students. Now the universities are refusing to disclose their selection process and who they are selecting. Judges are siding with foreign governments and allowing them to install spies in our universities. This week I ran across some information that is a seriously disturbing trend in the U.S. housing market, and that's the rising age of first-time home buyers. In 2024, the age of a first-time home buyer rose to 38 years old. In 2023, it was 35. In 1981, the average first-time home buyer was in their late 20s. That's an indication of how our markets are going, how our money is being manipulated, how much harder people have to work just to get to where they were previously. Now, as the summer season kicks off, I want to make a note that violence is getting started also, and that you need to be careful out there. A number of conflicts seem to be erupting across the nation. Last couple of weeks, there were, I believe it was 1,000 rioters marched in Los Angeles, California, vandalizing buildings and railroad cars. The police had to form a line to to control the rioters and disperse them. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 9 were wounded, 2 were killed in Lewin Hill Park. That incident appears to have erupted out of a domestic violence incident. In Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, 11 people were shot. There was a boating excursion. I believe it took a group of people out on a cruise, and sometime about when they got back, there were some dispute erupted, and 11 people ended up being shot. Now, mind you, this is during Bike Week at Myrtle Beach, so go figure. Another rather disturbing situation occurred in Colorado Springs. 6 people were shot, one person was killed. The interesting thing here is that it seems to have been a protracted battle. It wasn't just an instant people shooting at each other and they all run in opposite directions. They felt emboldened and they continued to pursue each other. And the last thing that I want to note, last conflict I want to note, was in Seattle, Washington. A permitted meeting turned violent when a Christian group called Pursuit Northwest held a concert and prayer vigil. And then Antifa groups showed up and to counter their vigil. The Christian group went by the rules. They went to the city to get a permit. Parks Department offered Cal Anderson Park to accommodate a large crowd. Then when the event occurred, the counter-protesters, Antifa, arrived engaged in violence with police. 27 of the protesters were arrested. No one from the Christian group was arrested. They stayed behind the police, let the police handle the situation. The mayor decried the Christian group, claiming that they chose the park because of the Christian group's stance and was in opposition to the namesake of the park. The Cal Anderson was the first openly gay congressman from the state. The mayor completely ignored the park department's influence in the decision. Many other civic groups echoed the police, especially the police association, echoed the mayor's comments and decried Pursuit Northwest. Despite the Christian group engaging in no violence and the only people who did engage in violence were rioters that came to counter-protest. The leader of the group has called on the Seattle mayor, to resign. Now, not to be outdone by homegrown violence, the U.S. State Department has issued a terror risk warning for many destinations in Europe. And I quote from their release, the State Department's release, other level 2 European countries with risk of potential terrorism include, but are not limited to, Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Spain, Sweden, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. Now, I would have warned you about the United Kingdom, but not because of terrorism, because of the hooligans that run up and down the streets. Fortunately, I didn't run into too many hooligans at the time. Just a bunch of U.S. military that I had to be careful of. The last thing that I want to cover today, I just shake my head every time I look at stuff like this, and I just, how do people keep falling for these things? Recently, CNN news host Jake Tapper revealed in a book about the decline of the previous U.S. president. This shocked no one who was watching what was happening. During the 2020 presidential campaign, the president's events, then candidate, were carefully orchestrated, and there were very few of them. We joked he was campaigning from his basement. Then for 4 years, we watched as one event after another transpired, and we're able to see his cognitive ability was very questionable. Media figures like Jake decried any question of the president's mental ability. Many people were publicly shamed on the sets of CNN, MSNBC, or various other media shows. Well, Tapper has discovered his audience now that he has shrunk by 25% since revealing that he was misleading the public. My only problem? He still has 75% of his audience left. He and his associates, they should be drummed out of polite society. He revealed how right we were, and the country was run by a group of 5 known as the Politburo. Those 5 people included long-term advisors Mike Donnellan, Steve Ricchetti, Bruce Reed, and family members Jill Biden and Hunter Biden. Yes, the crackhead son who was accepting bribes from the Chinese Communist Party and laundering money to the Wuhan lab. I don't remember voting for him, and I don't care what Jill's credentials are. I didn't vote for her either. In fact, no one voted for her. This leads me to question, what was the point of Kamala Harris? Shouldn't she have stepped up and taken on some of the president's burdens? If she was being left out of the discussion, shouldn't she have demanded access to the president and gone to Congress if something was wrong? What exactly is going on in Washington, D.C.? Enough of that tangent, though. Back to the topic. Instead of questioning the narrative from the administration, media figures aided sketchy politicians to engage in who knows what kind of crimes. That is not the representation we need. That is not how a republic works. And if we do not address it now, we won't have a republic much longer. I encourage you to pay attention, watch what's happening. I'm trying to dig through and look beyond the surface and let you know, hey, what else is going on behind there. If you have found this video to be of use, of any value to you, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have found it to be of no value to you, please complain in the comments below. If you found it helpful, I'd love for you to make some comments. Help me feed my addiction to reporting the news. I don't know why I ended up with this, but it allows me to look and see how things are changing in the world and to let you guys know to pay attention and what things I think you need to pay attention to. Much love to everybody, and I hope that you guys are doing well, and I hope that your families are doing well also. I look forward to talking to you again soon, and I've got tons of topics to go over if I can dig through and get the information to back them all up. Thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you again very soon, and that's all for this week.